But actually, we probably need to make an introduction. This is week 7, right? So actually, we're at the midpoint now, and it's all downhill or uphill from here. And what I even actually wanted to do is put a complaints or suggestions box onto the Microsoft Teams Club site, but I might desist from that for the moment to see what happens. But I thought that we might start doing things a little bit differently in these Wednesday sessions, because we had a talk, Ilya and I, and one thing that I want to do, or we decided, right, is that each week we'll have kind of debates, but not like proper debates, I guess, organized ones, etc. It'll be more like there'll be questions which are related to the week's themes, and then and usually there'll be like articles or videos which I ask people to actually watch before coming to this. And then hopefully everyone can actually say something or contribute something in some way. And either, by making some kind of text comment in the text box, or actually talking, which is always good. And since we know who everyone is here, we can, prod each person with a question. Can we do that, Ilya? Can we actually send a text to a particular person?
Yeah, and add 10% to the final mark because of attendance.
No, you see, the thing is, right, the original concept of live tweets, when we were doing this in a classroom, was to actually get people to talk. Because the problem is, in a classroom, people are normally shy. So there's always like, 2 or 3 or 5 people, right, that actually are going, and kind of asking questions and stuff like that. And everybody else is kind of shy, etc. And just listening, or maybe, as Ilya would say, Facebooking. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've noticed in the last few weeks, Andrew, Connor, and Depiti I hope I say it correctly, Dipesh Kumar.
DT, right?
Yeah.
Dipesh Kumar, yeah.
Really have input. So
yes, exactly. So this is fantastic.
Is much appreciation, seriously, because otherwise it just seems really silly, like I'm talking to a bloody monitor.
Well, actually, the thing is, what I would like this to become, right? And I think maybe online learning should be like this, or evolve, is almost like radio, like talkback radio. So I don't know, probably nobody here except for us who listen to talkback radio, but in talkback radio, usually it's the people that present would come on air and they would say, well, we have a couple of topics, right? And they'd be like, weird questions and stuff like that. And then they discuss things first, and then they ask people to respond to it, And it's almost like as if what they're doing is what people should be doing in a tutorial if they're having a discussion, that kind of thing, And they've been doing this for decades in talkback radio. So I think this is Radio ISIS 3300. And it's DJ John and DJ Ilya. We're not actually DJs of music, we're DJs of ideas. So what are you showing, DJ Ilya?
Well, at the moment, because right at the start, the question was posed saying, what about assignment 3 for the video? And it was a good thing to pop up, because I posted the links to both of the applications that I use. I've used for a long time now. And the first one is the screen capture application. And I've noticed that what I'm showing there is OBS, the open broadcast software. It's freeware. It's basically open source, and a lot of people, it's very, very professional. I mean, instead of paying you like thousands of dollars for applications, this guy here free. I'm quite surprised, actually.
Yeah, it looks nice.
Yeah. The only issue with it is, and I have no idea why they haven't put it in there, is it doesn't show up child windows, right? So, like, for instance, at the moment I've got the browser open here,
Yeah.
And if I click on the menu up the top here, you
Yeah.
can see on my screen it actually shows the child window, which is the menu, but you guys don't get it. Like doesn't
What is
get
a child window? Or what is a
Yeah.
child window? Ilya, can you describe it? What
So,
is
the browser itself would be considered the parent, and,
okay.
and then the parent has inside it child windows. So it basically creates windows within itself, child windows, and each
Does
one
that mean? Does that
Tab.
mean if I'm? Yeah. Okay.
so,
Does that
each
mean
one,
if I'm? Yeah.
go ahead.
Does that mean if I'm using Firefox,
Yeah.
and the Firefox windows that I'm looking at is the parent window, and if I open up Google, then Google is the child window within Firefox.
Within it, yes. So in other words, the parent window for, let's say, I use Brave, the browser called Brave, right? And this browser, as soon as you open the application, it creates a master window, and that master window is the parent for all other windows within it. So each one of these menus is actually in a window, right? So each one of these, even these icons, they're in a window. So basically this one master window will have basically thousands of little windows, right? Even the tabs themselves are considered windows, but they're forked. They call it fork, where it spawns a process by the master window. So all of these tabs will actually be child windows, right? But menus are specific. They pop out, so they're not directly shown within the main menu. So like now I've clicked the menu here, and the menu on my screen actually shows me the child window, which is all of the like new tab, go to extensions, tools, settings, and so forth. That's not captured by OBS. So you have to be quite careful with it. That if you want to do a presentation and you want to show people the right click, right? The right click will spawn a child window, but it's actually a popped out window. It's not directly shown in the master window. So that's the only drawback with OBS, is it doesn't capture those child windows.
And what would you use OBS for, Ilya?
Well, basically to do presentations. So like here, is everyone sitting down? Because I'm going to turn my web on, and I don't want you to fall over, because most of my students think I'm a bikie of sorts, right?
Yes, actually.
All right. So yeah, be prepared, right? Be prepared to shop. So I'm going to turn on my web, right? Angry you. So I'm going to turn on my web. So you notice here what I've done is I've created in OBS. I can create scenes, right? And all of these scenes, I've named them different applications which I use within my screen cap. So if I do shortcut hotkey to, let's say, presentation, if I open it here, so I've got my presentation here. I can flick through different applications to say I want to, show. Hang on, where are we? Because I've got to have them all open. They're all minimised. So I can go through like the presentation. I can go to like my Excel spreadsheet. I can also go to like File Explorer. So these are all short hotkeys to what I've got open on my desktop.
Okay.
So I can assign them as scenes, right? And then each one of these scenes, so if I go back to, let's say, the PowerPoint, the presentation, each scene I can actually add into the scene what I would want to use in that scene. So
where do you add that? Into OBS or into Shortcut?
Into OBS.
Into OBS, yeah.
So OBS here. So when I want to do a PowerPoint, I add my PowerPoint that I want to show, and it has to be running somewhere in the background. So if I go to PowerPoint, I can actually flick through PowerPoint. Right?
But it will show that particular slide. It will show that slide, the one that you're looking at.
So what I've captured, what you see here will actually become the video, the context. And so what I've got here is, get ready for it, because I'm going to flick on the camera. I've also got the webcam here, and at the moment I've got it not displaying. But when I flick it, you actually see me, right? Right. So I can place myself in the bottom corner here, or I can move my image. So I can put my image anywhere on the screen, and then actually start screen capture. I'm going to put it down here, and screen capture. I can then go through my PowerPoint while I'm capturing myself and the screen cap. Right.
That's cool. Yeah.
So it just shows you that I can even add into this little group here. I can even add my Excel, Explorer, Brave, so I can actually add them into my view if I really want to.
But I guess if students are doing a presentation, the only thing they would need to worry about is the screen capture of their image when they're talking, and also the PowerPoint slide. So OBS would only need to handle two things, I think, for the average presentation. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, you can add other screens within your capture by just adding into here what you actually want to show and what you don't want to show.
And I guess one of the things that this would enable students to do is, remember, according to the rules on assignment 3, it's 8 minutes long, and you have to be visible. When you're doing the presentation for 7 of those minutes. So for 1 minute, you can have maybe video, for example. So students can probably maybe have video clips, which then they could put into different windows, and they could maybe fill the whole screen, or actually just run the videos simultaneously. Can they run the videos?
Yes.
At the same time as they're talking?
You can put in, like, if you need to do like a YouTube or some other video, you can add it into your screen.
Yeah.
And you add it in as a source of information for a particular site.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, that would be good if you had a video with no sound, for example, because if you're talking, right, then you can just have the video clip playing to maybe add emphasis to what you're saying. So you're kind of describing what's happening in the video. As it's unfolded.
Because if you really want to, you can also do audio capture as a separate device. So you
okay. What does that do? Does that mean it records audio and you can actually embed it within one of the windows?
Yes. So you can have, so you can capture video, audio separately if you want to.
Okay.
If you need to, you can mask your audio at the same time. But
I think I know how this can be actually useful, because once again I'm going back to the radio metaphor. If you want to put in sound effects, for example, so I think that if you're talking, you should never reveal your true self, right? Because if I reveal my true self, I look like that monster in Star Trek. Actually, no, we should have a competition. Who does Ilya look most like?
What I should do, I really need to shave this off so I look like one.
No, because you know who you look like, Ilya? Ron Liebman. You know the TV series Sons of Anarchy? I mean, the kind of head of the outlaw motorcycle gang, very brutal guy, right? Yes, Gandalf beard, that's it. So he's a cross between Gandalf and the head of an outlaw motorcycle gang.
Well, my kids have already offered, my daughters have already offered to braid my beard.
Oh, look, that's Santa Claus. I like that. Actually, if you do actually reveal your true self in the future, you need to wear a red hat, right? One of those Santa hats, right? It's Christmas in September.
I got a question yesterday saying, where the hell did you, and they didn't say hell, they used the F word. They said, where the F and hell did you get your haircut? Your haircut, because you're not allowed to.
Oh, you got a haircut, yeah.
Yeah, so I did the usual. I got it all shaved off by my daughter. She's really handy with the clippers.
Well, good. Yeah. I mean, like, but,
No, otherwise, like if you saw me before, because I had long hair, I look like Thor.
wait a minute. I'm trying to get a picture of Thor.
Even with the beer gut and all the rest of it.
Wait a minute. Beer gut? But you don't drink beer. We have access to alcohol on New Face Alpha. So, no, I mean, I'm trying to find a classic meme, right, which actually has, I think Socrates' beard, right, and Socrates' beard looks like yours, right, and it's got like a measure, like apparently in ancient Greece, they measured how smart you were as a philosopher by the length of your beard.
But what I should do is hang on. Let me just start this. I'll start my version of Shotcut over here. So you get the idea. If the guys like if you download OBS, you really can't make a problem. Like there's so many YouTubes available and all that sort of stuff and instructions how to use it, but it's really basic.
How about this, Ilya? What I'm going to do is I'm going to start a thread on actually we should have a Santa Claus meme. Actually, why don't you replace your photo with a picture of Santa Claus? Right? Just like traditional, because it's exactly the same, right? You know what I mean? It's like, I'm going to start a thread on the club on Teams, and it'll be like a assignment 3 tips thread. And if you can put down the link to OBS and the link to Shotcut and any links in there, and if you find just maybe the best example or one example of a YouTube video for each of those, that's a how-to one, and we'll put them there, and that's the one place that students can go to if they want quick advice on that.
But just to show you here, I've got Shotcut open.
Shotcut. And what is Shotcut, Ilya?
Shotcut. So once you've done your video capture, the video capture will create either an AVI file or MKV file, or if you're really fussy, you can do an MP4 straight away. But I recommend leave it on defaults, so you get like maximum, because MP4s are basically crunched down. They're like compressed video files. They don't have all the info in it. And then you open Shotcut and just create try something. Just a temporary. And now I'm working on a. What I would do here is I would just grab a video. Let's grab, I don't know why I've got this one, but anyway, here. So I've grabbed a video, and on the video, once I've put it in here, I can just drag it down into my timeline. So I drop it here. And on the timeline, what happens in Shotcut, it gives you basically one track, which is the video, which contains the audio and the video. Right? If I wanted to manipulate the audio, what I would do is I would add another track, which is the audio track. And in audio track, what I would do is, did I actually put it in there properly? Let me just remove that.
Can it go out of sync, Ilya? I mean, when you're doing editing with Shotcut, how can you make sure that the sound synchronizes with the images?
But what I'm doing now is I've just put the same video in a video track, and the video has audio, so I can actually mute the audio. I've added a separate track which is purely just audio, and then I can take the same video and actually drag it down to right, let me just grab this right here, and I can drag him down to the audio. now what I've got is I can effectively, manipulate the audio to the video.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that makes sense, and it's quite useful because then I can go into the audio and actually cut things out and replace audio, or with the audio I can add filters, which are here, and I can add audio filters to actually say, increase the bass and fade in, fade out, increase the volume, decrease the volume, and so forth.
So in other words, this is like if you were writing something using Microsoft Word, and often I would say put it in italics or use bold, for example, then you can do the same thing in a video by maybe like increasing the sound. If you increase the sound or change the pitch, that's a way of emphasizing what something is said.
I could add the gain control, and then I can increase the volume, so I can make it really loud by saying, extra 13 dB.
Yeah.
If I played it back, it'll be at least 3-4 times louder than the original.
Okay. Yeah. And blow out speakers. Yeah.
Good thing is I can go anywhere in the audio and actually just cut. So I can cut the.
And does it still sync with the images? I mean, for example, usually if I would download a video, for example, right, often I find that the sound is out of sync with the images. So people may be talking and it doesn't match up with their lip movements. But in VLC, there's a way of actually tweaking so the sound resyncs. Do you have this control in Shotcut? I mean, if you actually do the pitch control.
There are syncs in there, but I don't. I haven't used it.
Okay. Yeah.
And you notice here I've actually chopped a whole section of audio out.
Yeah.
I can actually replace it. I can put in like Tchaikovsky.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And add it into the gap. Right.
And I've noticed that people actually do that if they try to bypass the copyright filters on YouTube, because often people will upload a movie, for example, and the way the copyright filters work is they look for copyright songs, for example. So what people do is they take the copyright songs out of the movie and just leave, like a black sound patch in them.
Correct.
I assume that they must be using something like Shotcut for that. Am I correct?
Yeah. Most likely either Shotcut or some really expensive app. But that was what I was getting at, is because I just put Tchaikovsky in, I can actually rehash Tchaikovsky. Just for instance, in this voice bit here, by just adding a different, like a low pass, or just put some noise into the audio, where audibly you won't be able to hear it, but as a digital device, it looks for exactly that pattern. Okay. So if I embed some noise into it, it doesn't recognise it as the original anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what you're getting at, is otherwise you get copyright notices and stuff. But it is worthwhile just to make sure that you do use Shotcut and OBS because they're free. The only issue is that you can't use them on your device, so you can't use your phone and so forth. You have to be a laptop.
How long does it take you to become reasonably competent if you use Shotcut?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? 10 minutes,
Easily, yeah.
Easily, yeah?
Yeah.
But OBS, even shorter, or the same amount of time? 10 minutes?
OBS would be a little bit more, because you have to set up your devices and your screens and so forth, where you're slowing out.
Yeah.
So with OBS, if I go back to OBS.
Yeah.
Here's my OBS. Yeah. So with OBS, it's a little bit more complex, because you have to add devices here, the new scenes, and then have to add, what are you actually going to do? Do slideshows, video capture, or devices. So you have to manipulate those a little bit. and obviously the screen layout, like you can see here, my presentation, I had to organise it so the bottom bar was actually off the screen. Right?
Okay.
My video, I want it placed here. Right?
Yeah.
You can also do things like just capture video alone at the same time. Right?
Yeah.
And because the video comes out in its own track, basically, then you can go back to Shotcut and actually manipulate the video by by manipulating the screen. You can have it moving across the screen and so forth.
Oh, okay. That'd be interesting as well. Yeah.
But for the assignment, I would just stick to the good old with you in the picture and with the presentation, and then just go through the presentation as you need. So yeah, I think just keep it simple.
Actually, I was just thinking that this would be an interesting way if people were artistic or wanted to actually experiment. You could actually interview yourself. If you had two images, one on either side, of a screen, right? And if you actually recorded, say, yourself asking questions to yourself, and you have responses on the other corner, so you can almost have like a Socratic dialogue with yourself. Or a discussion with yourself about the content on the screen.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't try that. Whether I can.
Yeah, because can you do two images? Let's see if you can do that. I'm just saying. Oh, you can. Yeah.
I could put myself up here and actually talk to
talk to yourself, or even have like for example, in a lot of cartoons, there's always that kind of little. The two things on each person's shoulder, like 10 more. Oh, so it's like that video clip, Bohemian Rhapsody. Yes, you could do a Bohemian Rhapsody, like have 100 images of you, right? Galileo, Magnifico. I was thinking, we could have a video contest, But once again, I think it'd just be a bit fiddly, I think, probably. But can you imagine how much easier it is to do this kind of stuff as it was when Queen were doing their clip, Bohemian Rhapsody, way back when?
So
oh, you're right. You see, that's what I'm saying. Keep on going. How many Ilias can you take? Right?
So I could probably have all these guys sitting up the top here. So it's one against 10.
No. But I'm thinking. Don't just do like 1,000 Iliads, right? You need to have like 2 Iliads or a group of Iliads having a conversation with each other. That would be more interesting if you could actually do that. But you'd have to kind of record it and sync it. You know what I mean? So there would be some skill required in that. But it'd be cool to actually see.
You'd need a script where you're reading from the script and then.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, rather than making stuff up. Yeah, you need to actually tightly script it and sync it. So that the lines kind of match up with each other. But that would look interesting. Very interesting. Fascinating. Right?
I'm going to turn all this stuff off.
Because I'm wondering, there's so many. I mean, there's so much open source stuff out there, right? It's kind of overwhelming, and it's sometimes difficult for people to kind of know what is out there. Is there a place that people can go to and actually search for, like video editing? So, like, is SourceForge.net or FreeMeat or those places? Can you actually trawl through the index of what's available to find? And then the other thing, Ilya, if people do download stuff that's open source, can it be trusted that it doesn't have malware in it? I mean, how can students actually make sure that what they get from an open source site?
You can't. But put it this way, like, highly unlikely to have something in it. But there were cases, I can't remember what the software was, I was downloading one of the, because I live on GitHub. And on GitHub, you through the shell there, you can search for all the latest updates and applications which are available. I think it's a bit better than open source. what's it called, Source Forge.
Source Forge right there. Yeah.
GitHub is the place to be if you.
Yeah.
If you're into programming as well, it's good to add.
Oh yeah,
add
yeah.
application. But I did one application, I can't quite remember, and some twit buried Trojan into it. So
Yeah.
but highly unlikely, because the community will really come back at you. And I just personally, when you're in the open source community, you try to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't, there are some people in the open source community that are really highly skilled. I don't think you could hide from them.
Yeah.
I think they track you down big time.
Because I think I asked you a question a few weeks ago about like an audio amplifier app that I was planning on installing on this laptop, right, to actually boost my sound levels, right? And I wanted to kind of make sure, whether it was actually malware free, and then I went to one of the, bulletin boards, I think on SourceForge.net, and there was a big, long series of discussions, right? And I think the consensus was that it was free of malware, but it's more like, there's still that kind of paranoia, like, should you actually click and install it, etc.
Yeah.
But I've also kind of, downloaded Malwarebytes, so I'm kind of wondering, like, if you run Malwarebytes over anything that you download from an open source site, does Malwarebytes actually check for, those pop-up ad things that people put in?
Put it this way, I use Malwarebytes. I think it's one of the better ones out there, but it doesn't cover everything. Right?
Oh, okay.
And you actually find it's actually not one of the best ones out there. I can't quite remember what the...
because Malwarebytes isn't actually like free or open source. It's more like you have 1 week or 2 weeks of trial and everything, and then it's free for basics. And if you want to have the full boy, for it.
I pay for Malwarebytes.
You do?
Yeah, and Malwarebytes for mine, I have it because you buy one license and it's available with license.
Okay.
But
is there any like open source equivalent for Malwarebytes, like an open source version?
I haven't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really trust open source malware stuff.
Oh, okay.
I'd rather have something went wrong than I could actually chase up open source. I don't think you get them.
Yeah.
But for myself, I use Bitdefender, and Bitdefender I have 15 licenses through my network, and Malwarebytes I've got three licenses which cover 9 devices.
Okay.
Yeah. But the malware does not pick up everything. If in some situations it'll actually skip, and Trojan can get installed before Malwarebytes even gets executed.
Okay.
So I've heard people say Kaspersky quite good, but yeah.
And what about Windows Defender?
But there are.
Is Windows Defender worth anything?
Just Windows. I think it's a joke. Yeah, we'll never go third party. Yeah. Go third party.
No, because officially, like if you have the RMIT laptops, they would say Windows Defender is enough. You don't need to have anything else. That's the ITS policy, apparently.
That's why they RMIT they give you that bloatware called McAfee.
Oh, okay, yeah.
McAfee, hopeless. Yeah. Not even worth looking at.
Let's move on.
But good advice.
Yeah. Let's move.
Tools for students. But really be careful what you install. It's good advice. Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
It's not worth getting your machine.
Usually what I do is I try to see what the gossip is about something. You try and find a bulletin board where people talk about a particular, open source product and see what they're saying, and hopefully, and then you check it with whatever you have, and then you just have to trust your instinct. Okay, moving right along, I think. But thanks for that, Ilya. That's the kind of another segment that I wanted to introduce in this half of the semester. Ask Ilya, where we kind of ask Ilya to actually show us how long his beard is, right? And also, talk about different products which could be of use for assignment 3. Because in the past, people may have said, John, why do we have to actually, learn how to use video editing stuff and whatever? Isn't this a course on, ethics, right? And I would think, well, but you still have to actually produce something, some kind of work that, can be assessed to judge your ability to understand the wonderful ethical concepts covered in this course, right? And, assignment 1 was doing that using, the traditional method of, writing a report. Right? And thanks to everyone for submitting their assignments, by the way, and we're kind of deep in it. And it's more like, academics marking like students, actually doing the assignments. So we kind of try to start. And kind of the most difficult thing about marking is actually kind of doing the first couple, right? And then you get into a rhythm, and then it's like, hey, this is kind of fun. Well, not really, but it's almost fun, right? It just takes a bit of time to get that momentum, that inertia is what kind of it has to be overcome first. But and Ilya's in it as well because he's doing a whole bunch of other courses as well. So. But eventually we'll become market hubs and the results as soon as possible.
John, we were intending to do, like the groups and all that sort of stuff, but I'm thinking because of numbers, might not be a good idea. Might be better just to do the usual, have a conversation about what ethics and so forth.
But still, the people who are here are free to actually, say something if they want, or we can ask them a question. I think, but I think, what I wanted to actually touch upon was, you showed that clip when you were showing how Shotcut works, and it was a debate, I think, about home invasion. You had a clip from a TV news program, I think. It said, is it right to protect your home from invasions, I think, because I think originally that's what kind of Ilya wanted to have as a discussion point, to start the discussion session.
See what the guys actually think, because not just talking about ethics, but like personal morals as well. Is if someone was, home invading, what would you do? What ethical framework would you actually apply for your own personal defence of your home, or do you not?
What do you think about it? I mean, that's the other thing. I think a lot of times, when people talk about this thing called ethics, difference between right and wrong, right? I think this whole notion of being ethical requires a bit of reflection and thinking about things. But often things happen in life that are very fast, boom, and then you have to react in some way. Right? And then, whoever you are, that's how you behave. So I think that's when, you're kind of natural or personal ethics, as Ilya says, kicks in. And I think that clip that Ilya was showing was from some news program, I think, that was discussing, I guess, almost like the ethics of self-defense in the home. Is it right to actually defend yourself if your home is invaded? And I think, I'm not sure what the official police advice is if somebody invades your home. Is it just, governments are held for protecting my family from burglars? So, in other words, this person was actually charged by the police, right?
Yeah, well, he nearly went into jail for protecting his own family from this guy. So,
Okay.
from
Oh,
this
that
guy.
guy. Okay. Yeah.
And this guy happens to be like a drug addict, known thief, all this sort of stuff. He was,
And he's only 21 years old. Sorry. Just.
but he actually he actually burgled the original guys.
Okay. Because,
Burgled this guy
yeah.
and was caught. So this guy, the homeowner, actually caught him, but found him outside of the property. And outside of the property, the burglar actually threatened him and so forth. Said, "I'm going to kill you." Blah, blah, blah. So the homeowner beat him up, right?
Yeah.
For beating him up, he almost got 11 months jail.
Yeah.
It just, and you think to yourself, hang on, where are all the ethics involved in here?
No, but the difference is reasonable force, right? I mean, the definition, a legal definition of self-defense, from what I understand, right, is that you have to use reasonable force in defending yourself. You can't use unreasonable force. So, which kind of reminds me of an incident. I think it was in Noble Park. This was like a long time ago. Somebody had their home invaded, and the occupant actually repelled the home invader with a samurai sword. So I'm thinking that if you're using a samurai sword to actually defend yourself, you're going to cause massive damage on the perpetrator. You know. So the point is that the police might say, well, isn't this like extreme? You know, and it's more, and that's what has to be judged, by the police or gathering evidence and then kind of put to law.
Once again, it goes back to reasonable force, right? And reasonable is like you have to make a judgment, very quick judgment, and that's why I think it's interesting for this course. The ethics part is that reasonable force really doesn't exist when you're in the moment, and in the moment you have like milliseconds to actually make decisions on what you will do, and that's where all the ethics, your personal morals, like all that ethics sort of bundles up into just that few milliseconds. So what ethics would you apply if you were in that situation? Do you know what I mean? So it'd be really interesting to see, even from students' point of view.
Just to interrupt, I think the thing is, right, and this is one of the reasons why I thought maybe having this kind of discussion, right, is not kind of right in terms of self-defense and home invasions, because it's more like that's kind of very emotional. And I think if you're talking about Kantian ethics or utilitarianism or virtue ethics, right, they require time for reflection. It's not about kind of split-second things, right? Because the thing is, if you don't reflect, right, then it's not really philosophy in a sense, or being ethical. I mean, like, what you're describing is something that happens in the moment, right? You don't have time to think, right? If you don't have time to think, all you have is instinct driving you, then how can you even be philosophical or ethical? That's what I would say, right?
But it's ingrown in you. So
but then that's more like fight or flight. There's two ways that people can behave, right? And I think that's a matter of upbringing and conditioning. So some people, if they're in a situation that's threatening, would fight. Other people would run away. That's probably what I would do, right? It's more like I would have to think twice, right? I would run really fast, right? But others I know wouldn't. Would be just kind of, let's push ahead, that kind of thing. Right? And
so
I think,
I'm going to change the scenario now.
Yeah.
It's not in your home. It's not out in the street.
Yeah.
It's in the workplace.
Yeah.
You have to make an ethical decision, split second, straight up.
Yeah.
How you can go off and have a meeting and discuss the philosophy behind it and so forth. You have to make a decision right there and bang. You've only got like 2 minutes to make it. And I've experienced it many times, especially like Box Hill, when our application was with Box Hill Hospital, and the application is not, it found a bug, it could kill hundreds of people. I can't go have meetings and all that. You have to make this right there. What are you going to do? And that's why I thought this sort of hit you in the back pocket. So if someone home invaded, it's a very close scenario to being in the office where you have to make a decision on not only things.
Let me interrupt. But the situation you're describing with the hospital and the software bug, for example, is kind of two ways that like a business person, I think, would think, right? It would be you would think just as a company person, and you would say, I have to make a split decision, and this is based on the benefits for the company, so that the company doesn't lose money, etc. So there's still, sustainability for employees, etc. That kind of thing. Or the other decision that the executive can make, right, is based on the people who could actually suffer.
Yes.
For example, right? So it's external to the company, and I would think that the way people are trained in business now, and maybe I could be wrong, it's more like about protecting their bucks, their money, their livelihood. It's not about, because it's like those Hollywood movies, with Erin Brockovich and civil action. It's a whole spate of Hollywood movies about evil big business and about how they're only concerned about making money, and then they just pollute the waterways or they pollute the air, and people in the areas where the factories are get sick of cancer and the companies don't care, for example. I mean, there's a whole range of movies like that where business is painted as being totally evil because they're just concerned about making decisions based on maximizing shareholder profit, that kind of thing, without caring about people. Full stop, right? And that's why if you look at code of conduct now, for I think Institute of Engineering, for example, they totally rejigged their code of conduct, because before codes of conduct were about protecting the Institute of Engineers and engineers themselves and not people. So now most codes of conduct, right, for Institute of Engineering, even for IT codes of conduct, the first and foremost thing is doing stuff to make sure you don't stuff up the world, people, etc., that kind of thing. Because a lot of people would say that's why, even climate change, etc., advocate for example, right? If you don't think about that kind of thing, then bad stuff happens. You have to think outside of yourself. And once again, that takes time, I think, as well.
Putting the human aspect into it. So if I go back to home invasion, like this guy, putting the human aspects into it, you start not thinking about the law and so forth. It's about your own personal experiences and so forth. Are you saying that you wouldn't get that in a work environment?
Well, I mean, like you said yourself to me earlier, that the work environment is a very political environment, and political in terms of power, not as in Liberal, Labor, Republican, Democrat.
But in the workplace, you have your, basically your ethics. This is what we stand for. This is what we'll follow. Do you think in that moment when you're really under pressure and so forth, that you actually go back to that list and follow the list, or is it just what you've got in your heart?
Well, some people would say, right, that in times of crisis, that's when people reveal their true selves. Who are they really? Because often in life, people hide who they really are. But in a crisis, often, your true self is revealed, and maybe your true self is ugly. It's not kind of a nice person. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the classic story from Robert Louis Stevenson. Right? But what Robert Louis Stevenson was trying to say in his novel, right, is that within each human being there is both good and evil, and constantly, fighting with each other. But I think what Stevenson always also said in his book was that we kind of need both of those things. We need the good with the evil to know what is really good. How can we actually know what's good if we don't know what the opposite is? But it doesn't mean we have to surrender to the good. So in other words, it's a kind of constant lifelong struggle between good and evil. So it's in a sense like Stoicism, for example. Stoicism is kind of, well, shit happens, for example, right? So it's a bad thing, you know. But we always have to look for the good stuff.
Now I'd like your opinion on this. Is we've looked at the home invasion bit to say, you know, instant and bang, you know, it's very, very quick. You can reflect that into the work environment, and as a business owner or a manager, you also may actually go outside of the bounds. But here's the biggie: if we take the trip into the future with AI, how is AI going to cope with it?
Well, see, the thing about AI now, right, is there's a principle, I think, in software development. Maybe the students here heard about it: garbage in, garbage out. You know? So it's more like what software is a reflection of who we are, or who the people that code the software is. So, and the other thing is, because software systems are so complex, right, that kind of no one person knows how to actually work. And in fact, if you read that article that put up as kind of background reading for today's discussion about machine learning, you can't actually know what a machine learning system does. It kind of learns as it goes, right? So, you know, and it's not like a traditional, you know, say pre-AI software package where you can kind of debug it, you know, maybe have walkthroughs and stuff like that, because it's a machine learning algorithm, so it learns, you know. So it's more like the way you can find out what it does is by what it does, but it can do stuff that's actually bad, you know, and kind of full of mistakes, and you won't know until it does it, you know. But it's more like, you know, attention to detail. Often people get kind of sloppy, right? And did you ever watch that TV show, A Little Britain?
Yeah.
You know, there's and actually Little Britain was one of the shows that was actually attacked by the cancel culture crowd recently, you know, because it had kind of
Yes.
racist segments in it. But one thing that I remember was a recurring gag in it, right? Somebody is in an office, right, and they're dealing with customers, right, and they're behind a computer screen. And every time this person was faced with an insurmountable question, she would say, "Computer says no. Computer says no." No. Yeah. So it's more like, I think what happens now often to the people that are kind of ignorant or even lazy is we become so dependent on technology that we kind of act like it. You know, so we says the technology says we can't do that, or the technology says that we're not allowed to do it, or, you know, we can only do this, for example. Yeah? And that's a dangerous kind of thing, you know. So it seems that probably and the thing that people have discovered with AI systems, right, is that it kind of funnels almost like the attitudes or the bad behaviors of the people that code it, you know, which is why the current debate in Silicon Valley and other places in the world where AI is being developed is that we should broaden the kind of developer base of, you know, who creates AI systems or machine learning systems, because otherwise you have racism and sexism and all kinds of nasty things being implicitly embedded into how an algorithm works, you know. Because algorithms are very sophisticated. It's not just sequence selection and repetition, that kind of thing. But well, it pretty much still is that, but it does it so quickly, right? That, you know, an ordinary human being kind of can't control that, and that's a dangerous thing. What's this in the literature?
Just talking about those algorithms, did you see that video? I'm sharing it at the moment. The AI robots, the simulation with, has got 6 legs on it, and task assigned to the robot was to walk from point A to B with the minimum amount of touches of the feet to the floor. Right? And the algorithm was run, and immediately came back and says 0 touches. Mm-hmm. And the guy who actually created the program thought, how can that be? You can't have 0 feet touching the floor. And what actually happened was AI was smart enough and it figured out that it could flip itself over and actually walk on basically on the joints rather than on the feet.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so I'm just thinking, what sort of things, like even what you were just talking about, when we program these things into AI, what do we miss, which the AI will pick up? Interesting.
But aren't we being anthropomorphic in that we're kind of, giving this robot the same capacity to think as we are, the way you describe it, right? I mean, the way you describe it is you're thinking like a human. That's how you would actually solve it if you were a devious, human. You'd probably, fall on your back, right, and maybe just crawl on your back somewhere rather than, using your arms and legs, for example. Whereas I think what just happened was an accident. There are many different ways that, the robot could behave, and it just happened to pick that way of doing it, which was actually the right way.
But to add to it, here's the next part, there was another AI simulation where the robot is assigned to pick up units.
Yeah.
But what they did was they got the unit and not the unit, but in the program, and it could disable the unit and be able to open the jaws. And then they said, right, pick up. And the AI figured out on its own that it can position itself in such a way where the cube would perfectly fit into that claw without opening. Great, right?
Yeah.
Which means AI, that's kind of like it's showing smart. So maybe that's just the beginning of super smarts, where it'll outsmart us and start modifying its own programming.
I think actual intelligence is something different. I mean, once again, that's kind of just many different possibilities, and it probably runs through it very quickly, and it happens to pick the optimal one. But I think that true intelligence is more like we don't know why we do certain things that are intelligent. That's what makes us intelligent. That TV series Westworld, the remake, of the Mike Crichton movie. But in the first season of Westworld, they have all these sequences where the robot engineers or the AI engineers are debriefing their robot android, right? And the reason why they do that is they want to make sure that the robots don't develop consciousness, because if they develop consciousness, maybe they can rebel, So they always run through certain questions. So, and they ask this female robot, why did you do this and this, right? And then you can see her, she's acting like robotic. She gives an explanation, and she goes into, I did this because of the psychology of humans, if they react, etc., that kind of thing. But then, as the series progresses, when they do the same test on her, right, they ask her, why did you do this? And she just says, I don't know. I just did it. Right? And that's when you know that she actually has developed consciousness. Because you have to think yourself, Ilya, when you do something, right, do you often know how you do it or why you do it? It seems almost like, it's compiled into your very being. You've actually kind of done something so intelligent, right, that you can't even explain why you've done it. Right? It's then up to, like 5 other people to do PhD theses, right, to work out why you've done something the way you've done it.
You can see that with just animals, birds. They're bored.
But the difference is, okay, and I've thought about this for a long time. I mean, like a shark. Okay, like somebody once said this, right? They said if your dog actually built a termite mound in your backyard, right, then you would say the dog's fantastically intelligent, right? But termites have been doing this since the beginning of time, or since termites existed, right? They create termites, right? And people don't say, wow, termites are super intelligent. And when you look at termite mounds or ant colonies or beehive, they're very beautiful and sophisticated and organized entities. But once again, it's kind of like a swarm intelligence. Right? You have a whole bunch of entities working in unison together, and they create something sophisticated and it looks intelligent from our perspective, you know, because a whole bunch of little things, and people have taken those ideas and they've developed, you know, algorithmic techniques. You know, so there's a technique in optimization called ant colony optimization, and ant colony optimization is borrowed from how ants build colonies. You know, and it's more like, you know, like if your dog actually did create a termite farm, and then you asked your dog, you know, how did you do that? And the dog would probably say, I don't understand you because you're speaking human and I'm a dog. So, you know, that's, I mean, like, and there's other things, right? You know, like I think it was Bertrand Russell, who's a famous philosopher, and he once said something like, you know, like a lion can't describe to you that his father was poor but honest, you know, that kind of stuff, you know. But humans can kind of know that. I mean, that's the thing when people talk about knowledge, it's really unusual, because to me, knowledge is something like really vastly complex and, you know, almost something that, you know, we still don't really understand what it is, you know, etc. Because we can't kind of, you know, bring it down to a kind of low level. You know?
Yeah. But it'd be interesting to see these sort of ethical dilemmas, how they're actually implemented in AI. Yeah.
But that's the dangerous thing. The thing is, like, most people are saying now, and I think maybe some people might do this as their assignment 3 topic, you know, like driverless cars, for example. What kind of you know, ethical system will be in a driverless car? And I think the rule of thumb is that we say, oh, utilitarianism, you know. But utilitarianism would then lead to that trolley problem kind of thing. You know, you're going to have a car that, you know, is going to always kill somebody, you know, if it has a choice, you know, either killing one person or 3 people, you know, in its kind of line of sight. For example, it's still going to be not palatable to a human being, for example, because I think with humans, it's more like, what saves us from going nuts, right, I think, is the random nature of life. Because, you know, things are complex, things happen through chance, right? And there's sometimes comfort in chance. Like, it's what you don't know that actually protects you from going nuts, I think. You know?
Yeah.
But then again, you know, nowadays with the coronavirus, for example, it was talking about, and we're living in unprecedented time, cliche, for example. And tremendous uncertainty, for example. But I would argue that life has always been uncertain, you know? I mean, like, when, as, you know, unless you're actually a slave, for example, if you were living during the Roman Empire, right, and you were a slave, right, then you wouldn't have this ambiguity. You know that you're a slave, you know that you don't have your own life. Yeah. That's it, you know. And that's one of the reasons why you have this ethical framework called Stoicism that kind of emerged the way it did, right? It came from a slave, but somebody that didn't have their own life, trying to come up with a way to actually, you know, exist, to lead some kind of, you know, existence that wasn't kind of, you know, certain, etc., that kind of thing, you know. So yeah. It's based on certainty, as I was saying.
Conversation with friends, you know, barbecue type conversation, many years ago.
Yeah.
And we were talking about slaves, right? And we were trying to say, what would you do if you were a slave, or how would you live? And we went through all these sort of questions. And I told my friend, I said, if you've got a budgie in a cage, and it's been in the cage, you know, all of its life, and you open the cage and let the budgie out, what would happen? And everybody just said, oh, well, it would die.
Yes.
And then we said, so if someone was a slave, basically that budgie, and you let them free, what would happen? And we had like a huge discussion on it. And it was interesting to see. It's like, would you be, like, if I was a slave and I was born into slavery and all of a sudden I got my freedom, how would I act? What would I do? Maybe I wouldn't know what to do, right? Maybe I wouldn't even have any ethics as well.
Well, actually, no, it's good that you mentioned that, Ilya, because it's a nice segue to the enrichment material that I put in the announcement this week. Remember Shawshank Redemption,
Yes.
which is one of my favorite movies. I don't know. Has anybody actually taken the liberty of watching that clip?
Yep, I
From
did.
Shawshank Redemption, yeah. But the whole thing about Shawshank Redemption is it's got a sequence in it where it describes exactly what you say. One of the inmates, right, gets paroled, right, but can't actually survive on the outside, and then he,
Hmm.
takes the other route, which he shouldn't take, etc. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
But,
but the thing about the Shawshank Redemption, right, that ending sequence, if you haven't watched that clip, you should watch it, really. And I'm surprised, Ilya, that you haven't been moved by that. Seriously. In this lockdown time, even before lockdown time, if I was kind of feeling depressed and down, I would always watch that clip. Right? It's like a secular prayer. Seriously, right? I mean, and I've been watching Shawshank Redemption since it was first released, right? And it's the kind of film that when it was first released, it was a box office flop. People kind of gave it negative reviews, right? And it's one of the only films, famous film critic called Roger Ebert in the US, right? He wrote the first review, canned it. He saw it again a few years later, and he loved it. He finally realized what it was about. It's about hope, and it's about friendship. Two things, right? That Aristotle was kind of always on about. Those are two prime virtues in life, for example, right? And especially in these times, in lockdown, for example, right? With the coronavirus, etc. Hope and friendship, right? And I think, and the other thing, existentialism, which I kind of mentioned, right? Because in that clip, there's a kind of line where Morgan Freeman is talking about, when he's discovered in that letter, and he has to go to that town where his friend might be. And he says that he's so excited, right, that he can't hold a thought in his mind. And it's the kind of excitement and feeling that only a free man can have, on a journey where everything is uncertain, And that's the thing about existentialism is we create, because if we are free, we can create the future for ourselves, making decisions, I mean, yes, it's uncertain, but the choices that we make can lead to good things or bad things. We're not sure, and that doesn't matter as long as we can make decisions along the way. And think about hope, for example. One famous quote about hope that I remember is, "Hope is the thing with wings. Hope is the thing with wings." Right? And I remember Woody Allen, the comedian and actor and controversial figure, etc., who I think he married his own daughter or something like that. His first book that he wrote was called Without Feathers. And if you think about it, right, why did he call it Without Feathers? Right? And it's more like that quote that I just said, hope is the thing with wings. Without feathers, no hope. But it's more like Woody just trying to be kind of funny and profound as well. Because Woody Allen's an interesting character. Right? He actually, I don't think he finished high school, or he never went to university, but he's quite smart, right? And once in an interview, he said that he would have liked to have actually gone to university and done courses, maybe like this, because in his movies and his writings, he's very philosophical. And he says that even though he actually picked up a lot of knowledge along the way by reading and so forth, he still would have liked to have had the structure and the discipline, the organization of doing university courses, because he finds that his own knowledge, even though it might be deep, it's kind of deep in niche areas. Whereas if you do a university course like this, you're exposed to a wide breadth of knowledge. And that's the kind of stuff that Woody Allen says is kind of missing in his life.
Do you think ethics is also linked? Is there a relationship between education and intelligence to ethics?
Education and intelligence?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing is, people would argue that education is kind of flawed, for example. I mean, like,
highly educated person has more ethics than someone who just finished high school? Or
but once again, you're actually you've got that bias of book learning. So education as book learning, or education as really opening your mind to allow stuff in. I think often people lead a life where their minds are closed. So, and I had this experience when I was trying to do another PhD early on, before I did the PhD that I had there. And I wanted to do something, and it was in the software engineering area, but I wanted to look at the aesthetics of coding, kind of the beauty of code, for example. Right? The person that was going to be my supervisor, but then wasn't, because I kind of scrapped it. And this person said, well, aesthetics is such a kind of broad area. You'd have to know everything about aesthetics if you want to actually tackle that problem. And really, I thought that was kind of BS, because it's more like you only need to know what you need to know in order to solve the problem. Right? Or kind of have a sense of what the landscape is, right? And that's true, I think, really. I don't think you need to. It's like I always tell you, Ilya, right? You don't need to read every single word of everything. If I give you something that you kind of get a sense of what the landscape is, and zero in on what kind of interests you or what you think is important. But too often people think if they're exposed to something, they have to know everything at a fine-grained detail. No, it's probably impossible to actually do that.
Personally, book learning is just it's for the average Joe. So yes, you go through grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. So you tick all the boxes, but real learning is really like this course that you've got. It's completely different to everything that people know, right? And and we can see that by a lot of students that we actually have. They don't get it, right? But some do, right? And it's a complete different, it's a complete different mindset of how you learn and open yourself up to knowledge, or create knowledge. And I agree with you with the book learning stuff. It seems that, like 90% of the population only want to do, I want to read this chapter, then test me, how much did I get? I want to read this chapter, test me. But how does that, because this course is so open, right? And I know from my experience just teaching and when you invited me into the course, it opened my world up completely, right? And it wasn't because you said, do this, do that, do that. It was because I had the initiative to say, oh, I'm interested in that. And it took me on a path, miles away from read chapter 2, read chapter 3, right? So, but my understanding of ethics has grown through the roof. And it's more in depth, I think, because I did my own learning at my own pace. If you get my drift. Back again. So if there's someone who is highly educated and so forth, or is there someone who's in primary school level, do they have a different level of understanding of ethics? Must be.
Well, I mean, obviously they wouldn't know the kind of terminology, you use terminology like utilitarianism or deontology, for example, and those would be fancy book learning terms. But I would think that a lot of times when people do make decisions trying to differentiate right from wrong, they would choose from a lot of the ideas that we have talked about in this course, but don't use the labels to describe, when we say stoicism, what do you say, Ilya, when I say stoicism?
You taught me shit happens.
Exactly. You see what I mean, right? So that would be stoicism if you were, say, working on a construction site, for example, right? But they would be using more exotic language than just saying shit happens. It's something that's wrong.
You're doing it again. See, it's if I just go back to the student assignments that have been submitted. A lot of them have just regurgitated chapter 1, chapter 2. This is what I read in a paragraph and so forth, right? It's very rare you get someone say, this is my understanding. This is the way I would employ it, rather than Bentham said this. Bentham was born on this day, and this is really like there's like a million miles between people who actually get it, and the guys who just sort of go step one, step two. Yes, I've done week 2, I've done week 3, right? But to actually get to that level of actually saying, this is my understanding, this is what I think, right? So forth. It just it's really missing a lot of the time. Yeah. But how do you tell people that? I don't know. Interesting.
Well, I mean, one of the reasons why I've been asking people to kind of watch films, for example, in this course, or this kind of like we're in exile, right? So for the live tweets, if we were doing this in a classroom, the live tweets would be a lot simpler, right? It'd be like we've got a TED talk, right? And then the students would have to kind of voice their opinion. But I was always talking with students, right, even when we were still in a classroom, right, that my ideal for a course would be, for something like this, would be to not do anything except for every week, if we're in a classroom, right, we actually do it in the cinema, right, and we show one movie a week. So we show one movie a week, right, and every week we have a discussion after the film, and the students have to write something about it, etc. That would be my ideal course. So an entire course, right, which is basically revolving around 12 films, and those films can change, as the years progress, because there's so many different movies. And the thing is, right, and back when, if you look in past weeks, I think when I used 2001: A Space Odyssey link for students to view, I had a link to a book, which is basically a book on how you can learn ethics through watching films or TV shows. And so there's a whole kind of industry that has emerged in academic publishing in the past 20 years, right? Where philosophers, right, have written books on how you can learn about philosophy, ethics, and whatever from watching.
It's becoming a requirement for, if you want to get into management and so forth, you have to have a tick box saying, yes, I understand and have done ethics. I've got some. But even still, it's like if I employed someone and they came into the office and said, yes, I've done ethics, and you've got this tick box on a piece of paper, it's not the same as actually understanding, like, what is your feeling of, or what do you understand as ethics, right? What are you, right? Like a picture of you, rather than, oh yes, I've done grade 3 ethics.
Big I mean, like, for example, like and in the past I used to show clips from a documentary called Enron, the Smartest Guys in the Room, right? And Enron was a famous American utility company that was really chonky in terms of ethical performance, and they kind of wrecked people's lives by, lots of people lost millions and millions of dollars, for example. Right? But if you watch that documentary, which I think is probably, on RMIT Netflix, right? Yeah. They have all these arrogant, CEOs and execs from, Enron that said, I'm not just smart, I'm effing smart. They actually say that. And like the point was made in the documentary that these people that ran Enron got business degrees, MBAs from the top universities in America, Stanford, Harvard, etc. And they must have gotten HDs in business ethics, right? Because all those universities teach business ethics, right? Yet they were the least ethical people that one could imagine, right? In fact, the fallout from Enron, right, is it destroyed an accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, because Arthur Andersen, you can't have an accounting firm that's unethical. Accounting firms are about trust, right? So Arthur Andersen went belly up, for example. And also it led to, changes in legislation for reporting of, company information, Sarbanes-Oxley Act, but also people saying things like, maybe now when people graduate with an MBA from US universities, that you need to have like an oath, like a a recitation of the oath, like the Hippocratic oaths, you know, when medicos graduate, etc. Maybe that'll make people more honest. But I would think, see, that just illustrates the difference between book learning and actual acquiring wisdom, you know, because anyone can get a HD, right?
But John, it'd be so obvious in the office because, like I said, check mark 1, 2. Yeah, I've done that. That would be so obvious because it'll just be regurgitation. I know Bentham said that. Kant said that. Right? That's the 90% that just follow chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. Right? I've done ethics, but that 10% which is on the side, which don't regurgitate all the rubbish and actually, you know, think and do things in a different way. Right? That's the important thing. And how does someone teach that? It's like extremely difficult.
Yeah, it is actually. And the thing is, it's more like, what you're saying is more like you want somebody in the workplace, right, that kind of just doesn't recite, you know, stuff we memorize, but can actually appreciate the complexity of things and the fact that, you know, there's ambiguity and all that kind of stuff, you know?
Exactly. It's like hiring a programmer. It says, yes, we know how to do C++ or C# or Java. And they just follow blindly. Function this, you know, method that, blah, blah. It's like boring, right? You want someone who can actually, you know, break boundaries and do something different. Do you know what I mean?
But the thing is, that's if I was running an IT company, I would only hire people that are geeks. You know, seriously, right? Yeah. Because hey, somebody that's a geek and somebody that perhaps doesn't have, you know, a straight HD average, for example, right? Because you want to have people, and I used to show this clip to students, right? It was a kind of management consultant who was basically saying the same thing. Right? Maybe I'm ripping that person off, and he was saying that he would never hire somebody that had a grade point average, I think 4.0, because that person didn't play around. And he wouldn't hire somebody with a grade point average of 2.0, because that man couldn't tie his shoelaces. That person couldn't tie his shoelaces. But what you want is somebody with a grade point average in between, because that person could actually play around and stuff around and still do something, you know. And he was saying that he was making the comparison to the founding fathers in the United States, right? He said those people actually played around and literally played around. If you look at the life of Thomas Jefferson, one of the smartest people that ever lived, right? U.S. president, etc., you know, architect of the Declaration of Independence, but he did some nasty things, unethical things, like having relationships with his slave, etc., and that kind of thing. Almost like before Bill Clinton did what Bill Clinton did in the White House, for example, right? And it's more like, well, but it's because of that, because, you know, he was kind of edgy and all that, that he was great, you know? He was imperfect. Like another academic at Yale University wrote a book entitled "Why Do Smart People Do Stupid Things?" It was basically case studies of smart people who did stupid things. And you know who's one of the case studies? Bill Clinton. You see, you know what Bill did, Monica Lewinsky, etc., that kind of stuff. Yeah? Yet the thing is, people still love Bill. Well, maybe, you know, not Hillary, etc., that kind of thing. But the thing is, like. And Bill is a massive contradiction, you know. I mean, like, Rhodes Scholar, you know, Governor of Arkansas, Monica Lewinsky episode, but people would say if he was going around on Air Force One, you know, on official business, right, he would actually be reading books relevant to what the mission was that he was going on, you know, rather than just, you know, accepting reports from his cronies. He wanted to find out himself, you know, that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Figure.
Yeah, I know that you really do have to make a lot of mistakes to make one really good decision.
Yeah. I mean, and I think maybe that's the thing with AI. With AI, the goal is not to make something that's, you know, totally perfect, because humans are imperfect. What you want to have is create a system that can be both profound and stupid. You know, I think it's our ability as humans to be both of that, you know, profound and stupid, that makes us who we are, humans. We are. on this planet, I guess the kind of ruling species for the moment, right? Because we can be both, stupid and intelligent.
So, do you think for this semester in assignment 3 that we will get some of that the different stuff, not just regurgitated Bentham said this?
Well, what? I think we want to put out more hints, right?
Yeah.
About assignment 3. What was that hint that you developed or we co-developed for how to get a HD in assignment 3? So in assignment 3, to get a HD, what you have to do is tell us something that we don't know.
Make it funny.
Make it funny and have something like wow, that kind of wow factor. And all those 3 things are not that difficult to do. So, what was one example, right? And maybe I'll see if the other thing I want to encourage, right, for students, right, is if you want to. I'm not kind of forcing students to do that. Please upload your assignment 3 videos to YouTube, right? Because I always think that YouTube is a fascinating platform, right? Because it's one way that people can share in knowledge, pop culture, etc., that kind of thing. And I think it's a great calling card for you in your future careers, right? And I was just speaking to a person last week, and she's a graduate of English literature, I believe, and she worked in social media for a while, and then because of all this crap, right, she had to take odd jobs, and she actually works in retail and pharmacy, right? And like she was saying, that she thinks that all people, if they want to have a job nowadays, should actually push themselves on social media. Twitter, she blogs, she tweets, and once again, YouTube is another platform you can push yourself out. Last semester, for the first time, much to my surprise, I had 2 students that actually put their assignments up on YouTube, and I'm trying to get permission from one student so that I can share her link, because I think it's more like a more private YouTube channel. But just to describe what was her amusing aspect of the video was that she introduced herself, and she introduced a bottle of expensive Japanese whiskey, right? And she said she always had a conversation with herself and the bottle of Japanese whiskey, and then just had it as part of the frame as she was doing the talk. And then she did the usual stuff that you need for a HD, which is, content, attention to detail, referencing, etc., that kind of stuff. So it doesn't have to be completely funny all the way. It's more like something that's kind of witty. And like most people kind of think that funny has to be rolled around laughing, etc., blazing silence, that kind of thing. No, it's more like a little bit of fun or levity or humor. There's something to take the edge off things, I think.
Be funny is interesting.
Well, yeah.
Just
I mean, like
a twist.
Yeah. And but the other guy, right, that actually put up his a video on YouTube, that wasn't actually kind of funny. It may have been funny in parts, but it was so dense. It was more like he didn't just talk about the ethical ideas that we covered, or some of them, right? But he also introduced like an aspect of sociology that was actually in the back of my head, and it was more like, how did this student actually refer to this aspect of sociology? I never mentioned it in class, right? Yeah. And it was something I always wanted to understand. It was more like serendipity. And not only that, but embedded in his video was actually like a science fiction story. And he may have kind of almost done 2 topics, I think. It was almost like he did 2 topics. He was covering one topic, but he was doing it in a kind of science fiction story way. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
Plus he had references as well. That's the other thing, right? So the thing is, like, you can't just be like a stand-up comedian. Like, you got to stick references in there as well to kind of back up what you're saying. But the way he did it wasn't kind of like, look at my references, etc. It was kind of subtle, It's like he did his kind of stuff that was amusing, right? And then could still fit in the references. Yeah.
Which was missing in some of the assignments last semester. References were not actually spoken about within the video. So it's one thing that should be highlighted as well. It's not just references at the end on one slide. That you mention them during your talk.
I mean, the thing is, if you say, okay, we'll be punished if we don't have embedded, videos in the PowerPoint slides and stuff like that. If we just actually talk by ourselves, facing the camera, that will get us a lower mark. Not necessarily the case. I think often when people do that is because they just do it in a kind of boring way, right? But I've had people that have done that in a fantastic way. I had one student a couple of semesters ago, right? And didn't have any PowerPoint slides. It was just him facing the camera. I think his phone camera. Right? He was sitting on his couch in his living room at home. Right? And I think the normal advice that I have, if you're actually doing something like that, you don't have PowerPoint slides, you don't have videos, how do you dress things up? You have props, right? So he had books that he was referring to. So you pick up a book, right, and show it and say, this book says this and this and this. So that was cool, right? But the thing is, the other subtle thing was the humour aspect of it. He was sitting next to a giant teddy bear. So he was on the couch sitting next to a giant teddy bear. And why was that important? It was almost like an in-joke for him to me, right? Because pay attention to detail. If you go back through the weeks, right, you'll notice there was an article from Harvard Business Review from some weird research that I found, right, that if you have the memories of childhood innocence in the workplace, it will make your workplace more ethical, believe it or not. So memories of child innocence are, if you have a teddy bear in your office, it will make you more ethical. Yeah. If you have a nursery rhymes playing in the lift or in the corridors of the office, it will make employees more ethical. Right? So that's why he was sitting next to a teddy bear. It was more like just him saying, look, I listened, I read what you said about teddy bears and ethics. Well, this is making me more ethical because I'm sitting next to a giant teddy bear.
Two presentations or assignments which is sort of I can remember was one girl, she was doing her presentation and in the video in the background, well actually not on the background, it sort of jumped up on the table in front of it was the cat. And the other one which I quite remember was the girl was doing her video presentation and she's really into it, and then her mother started like the vacuum cleaner and the dishes and all that in the background, and she didn't budge, she just kept going, which was brilliant.
I'm not sure if that was an accident or deliberate, because I saw a film the other day, again, the Grand Budapest Hotel, right? And it's got this scene at the start where an author is facing the camera and he's giving this speech, a serious speech, and all of a sudden he turns his head a bit and he says, don't do that, and his son kind of barges in, right? And starts talking. And then he continues to talk, but his son is behind him all the time, just kind of waiting to do something.
And remember, a while back was the toilet flush.
Oh yes, exactly, yeah.
This and you go, it was awesome, and it just kept. It was really funny.
I mean, it's too bad we're in lockdown mode. Otherwise, we would have. I'd like to see the dream one, right? Where somebody said to me once, John, the problem with all this online stuff is kind of like boring. It's just you or whatever. What you should be doing is delivering a lecture while you're water skiing or something like that, or climbing a mountain. I'm climbing up a mountain, for example, talking about Kantianism, etc.
Brilliant.
Oh, okay. But can you bring back that slide, the clip that you had from that documentary with that guy sitting in the chair, self-defense? I just wanted to point something out before we close.
Hang on. Here we go.
Okay. Now, I want you to look at the text, attention to detail. What do you notice? Read the text. 11 months of shell for protecting my
family.
You see,
Burglar.
mistake, right? See, the thing is, straight away I noticed that. I mean, like it was like I didn't even have to think. It's more like bullshit, you know. It's more like, and remember, this is actually a TV show, a really nationwide TV show, and they made this mistake. You know, I've noticed this so often lately. You know, either on TV screens or in ads where you have like spelling mistakes, right? And you kind of think, what? You know, I mean, like it's like I don't know. That's what I'm saying. So it's more like, and I'm sure that probably, I don't know, do you think anybody rang up the station and said, you know, why is family spelled incorrectly?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we have Microsoft Word, which will catch those sort of things these days.
You see what I mean? Don't trust technology. That's what they're thinking, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and don't use, what's that other tool, Grammarly? Have you heard of Grammarly?
Yeah, I've heard it. I've never used it.
Oh, it's so terrible. I had a PhD student that used Grammarly. It actually made everything worse. But, you know, so because, you know, it says, oh, we're going to actually have a system that not just corrects spelling, but it actually corrects grammar. But it does it in a weird way. So when you're reading it, it's more like, you know, am I getting a stroke or something? I can't. It's like, I don't know. I can't understand what's there. It's like, so that's what I'm saying. Attention to detail. Right? No, actually. But our question, remember, was, I think, if you remember from the announcement thing,
Andrew. You got to Andrew.
I said, sorry.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if it's like the assignment 2 said like you need 10 journal, 10 videos, and 10 live tweets. But if I check the Canvas in models week 7, there's nothing there. So
there is actually. Actually, let me check. I think. Actually, maybe if you beat me earlier.
it did not refresh yet.
Week 7. Let's see. I hope I actually activated week 7 learning materials, right? This week's live tweet, where is it? Come on. Oh yeah, week 7 live tweet task. This week you have let me check, I'll show you.
It's like 10 minutes ago I was just checking and it was like no new topics this week.
You're right.
Alright then, no worries.
Week 7. Oh, John just dropped out. Let's have it. Week 7.
Sorry, I'm back. It's just late.
Yeah, week 7.
My fingers are too big. I actually closed the window. Anyway, this week's live tweet is right below. I think there's two audio seminars because there's 2 themes this week, which is digital divide and the evolution of work. And then there's the coronavirus call-out from first semester, and there's a space for this one. And right below that are some references. So there's a bunch of references about evolution of work, digital, and below that is the week 7 live tweet, which is another one of my favorite movies. And Ilya, do you like Blade Runner?
Yep, I like all of them, even the second one. The repeat. Yep.
But this is the first Blade Runner, the one with Harrison.
I couldn't believe it. I had to go and watch it like 4 times because it was director's cut, director narrative, and all. Oh.
Yeah. And the thing about Blade Runner to me is that it's a film that's kind of relevant to this week's theme, especially in terms of work, because it's about AI and it's about AI replicants, which are actually owned by a company. And then the company kind of feels that when they develop consciousness, that's when they have to be terminated. So you have basically a branch of the police force that goes around knocking off androids when they develop consciousness. Because they can't be controlled. and they have this test called the WordCamp test, which actually is like a Turing test that measures whether androids are developing consciousness, and then you kind of see that at the start if you're not spoiled it. And also the other thing about the ambiguity of the film is you're never quite sure whether Decker, played by Harrison Ford, is actually real or not, because it's like we kind of get the drift that these robots have implanted memories to make them fit into human society more, and then you see Decker having this dream of a unicorn, and which is kind of odd, So is Decker actually dreaming that himself, or is it an implant? And I won't reveal anything more, but there's something ambiguous later in the film, which kind of makes you think even more about whether Decker is real or not. And the thing is, when the film was originally released, Ridley Scott, who directed it, had like a voiceover narration. So it was actually Harrison Ford's voice basically adding to the story. And then when they did the second cut of it, that was taken out, and also the ending was changed. The original film had a different ending, which was kind of more optimistic and definite. And the second version, without the narration, had a kind of ambiguous ending. And then there was the final cut, which was actually a little bit shorter, even still. So it's and that's I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Oh, remember last semester we had you actually reciting that line?
But I was always intrigued by the fact that he would go and save Decker at the last minute. He's like, his fingers are just about to release, he's about to die. And Rutger comes along and goes bang like this, and just grabs him.
You see, it's almost like a Christ-like metaphor. You notice in this picture that you're showing, Ilya, in one hand, Rutger Hauer is holding a dove. In the other, he's got like a spike through his hand because he's had a fight with Harrison Ford, and there's a spike in his hand. But the spike, to me, is almost like the nail through the hand of Christ when he's on the cross. You know what I mean?
He put the spike through his hand because he knew he was dying, and his hand was about to malfunction.
So yes, and he wants to feel pain. That's right.
Because if he didn't do it, he would have just had this like dead arm.
You're right. Yeah, but I think it's almost like the fact that Batty actually saves Decker is almost like the true ethics of Batty in the end. That he's not kind of against humans. He saves their life even though he knows he's going to die. And that final speech, where he kind of like tears in the rain, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think he passed away this year, Rutger Hauer, I think.
I didn't realise.
Last year, late last year or early this year. It's interesting, actually.
In Hitcher, that was a...
Yeah. So if you become a fan, students, of Rutger Hauer, try and actually Google for Hitcher, because I think you'll find it in various places, even on YouTube. Right?
That's an nightmare. That's a nightmare.
It's a nightmare. It's not. Yeah. So in other words, Rutger Hauer is really playing a nasty character in Hitcher. Yeah. But the thing about Blade Runner is more like, is it right for anyone to actually own anything that's kind of synthetic if they're an intelligent entity, And is it kind of morally right to prevent an intelligent entity from developing consciousness? That kind of thing. I really like even though it could be dangerous.
Anyway, good question. We're going to be wrapping up too.
So in other words, I hope that answered Andrew's question about the live tweet for this week. Has anybody actually here not seen Blade Runner? Everybody seen Blade Runner?
I've seen it many, many times.
That's awesome.
At least 5 times.
Yeah. But actually, the sequel to it that came out recently was a Blade Runner 2049. Is actually, it's quite good as well because also and you kind of know that the Blade Runner in the sequel, right, is actually a machine because he's doing this kind of test to see whether he's getting consciousness or not. But I like that test that he has. You know, I think I need to put up a clip of that, the test because he's just listening to all and saying all these weird things like interlinked, etc. Right? And you think it's gibberish, but it's not. It's actually like a line of poetry, a book by a Russian American author called Vladimir Nabokov. So Vladimir Nabokov wrote a book called Pale Fire, and Pale Fire is interesting as a novel because it's both a novel and actually a long poem in verse. Right? And you actually see it in the film Blade Runner 2049. So when the Blade Runner android goes back to his apartment and he's talking with some virtual chatbot, but on the table you see Pale Fire. Right? And that's because it's probably he has to read it and then kind of do that test to see if he's actually changed in his responses. Because it's a poem and a novel, right? When people read something it's like the book learning discussion that we have, right? If you're reading a poem, right, you can't read a poem or interpret a poem as if you were doing book learning because you have to interpret it. It's a human way of doing it, right? And that means you have to be human. So it's a very clever script for, a Blade Runner 2049.
Yeah.
And actually, when that film came out, it made people go out and read Nabokov's novel, because they thought it was like an Easter egg. There's probably some secrets in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other questions from the audience?
If not, remember email.
I hope everybody's kind of staying well and keeping safe and trying to do things. And remember, we're always here. So if you ever want to discuss things, you can always share stuff on the Digital Ethics Club, etc. And start a controversy. And that goes the same to you, Ilya. Because I said to you, Ilya, I want something every day from you.
It's only when I find something really interesting I'll choose to share it.
It's always something interesting. Remember, I can keep on going on about TikTok. Remember there's some news about TikTok, right?
I am now marking.
Oh, okay, you're now marking. Okay.
Bentham said this.
So that's the comment you should make in the Digital Ethics Club. Just every day you put down, I'm marking. I'm marking. I'm marking.
Don't forget to turn the video recording.
Oh, yes, okay, don't forget to turn the video off. And thank you, Ilya, for taking part in this and giving us your tutorial on OS and shortcuts. That's it. And we'll all do this again next week sometime. And watch out for the recording of this produced by Ilya using Shortcut. In the week 7 learning materials folder when it eventually arises in between Ilya's marking. And of course I have to mark too, etc. So I hope everybody has a good week and we'll catch each other either on the Digital Ethics Club or here next week. So see you all. Thanks Ilya. Thanks Andrew. Thanks Aubrey. Thanks Deepish Kumar. Thanks, Shruta. See you later. Now switch off the recording.